This is a guest essay by Peter Himmelman, a Grammy and Emmy Award nominated musician.
Everyone and their mother seems to be pleading for food to reach hungry civilians in Gaza, a plea I wholeheartedly believe in. But most of these conversations aren't about Palestinian suffering. They're a performance of outrage, divorced from context and devoid of compassion. There's virtually no mention of Hamas, no curiosity about how food is weaponized, no concern over how aid is diverted, no acknowledgement that two things can be true at once. First, some Palestinians in Gaza are starving. And second, Israel is fighting a terrorist regime embedded among those same civilians. In Gaza, whoever controls the food controls the people. That's why the conversation about food delivery is more than a humanitarian concern. It's also a political and military one. Food and aid truck inside Gaza waiting to be distributed. According to Israeli sources, over 1,000 aid trucks are currently inside Gaza, loaded with food, waiting for distribution. United Nations-affiliated groups, particularly UNRWA, the UN's Palestinian agency, an organization with a deeply compromised track record, have refused to distribute the supplies, claiming the conditions are unsafe. Their paralysis has left food to rot or be looted. Thousands more trucks sit at crossing points, caught in logistical and political limbo. Here's how Amjad Taha, a United Arab Emirates-based expert in Middle East political affairs, described it, and I quote, "The UN is starving Gaza on purpose. They're hoarding food like warlords, letting children starve so Hamas can keep playing victim. 900-plus trucks, millions in food and aid, all sitting inside Gaza, not outside, inside, owned by the UN. But the UN refuses to give a single bite to starving civilians. Why? Because Hamas, the sick terrorists of the Muslim Brotherhood, told them not to. The UN is obeying Hamas, using hunger as a negotiation tool with Israel. Israel let the aid in. The US begged the UN to hand it out. The UN refused. And why else? Because the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is feeding people without Hamas's dirty hands. That pissed off the UN. So now they're revenging on innocent people. Yes, revenging. Then they gaslight the world. Push it to TikTok. Blame Israel. Blame America. While they starve babies and serve terrorists, end quote. Hamas, for its part, has a vested interest in maintaining that chaos. It has regularly seized aid, rerouted food to fighters, and denied civilians access to aid from independent or Israeli-backed sources. In some cases, Hamas operatives have fired on their own people for lining up at non-Hamas distribution points, because food, like guns, sustains control. Losing control over food means losing power. IDF Arabic language spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Avichai Adri released footage last week that he said, quote, exposes the daily life of Hamas operatives in underground tunnels during the ongoing war. This is not conjecture. This is war by starvation, not by Israel, but by the group claiming to defend the Palestinian people, by the same regime that began a war by atrocity, that left its own civilians without shelter while it hid underground. Feeding civilians in the midst of an active war zone is, by nearly every military account, among the most dangerous missions a soldier can undertake. Gaza presents an extreme case. Hamas fighters purposefully do not wear uniforms and often operate from within civilian populations. When soldiers are tasked with distributing food in such environments, they are placed in immediate proximity to potential attackers who are indistinguishable from those in need. The risks of ambush, diversion, or deadly stampede are not hypothetical. They have happened repeatedly. This is why militaries around the world insist on secure zones and neutral intermediaries for aid delivery. In Gaza, those conditions do not exist. Meanwhile, the United States has attempted to bypass the impasse by backing the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a third-party agency tasked with facilitating delivery outside of Hamas or UN control. But UN agencies have bristled, saying this undermines their neutrality. They would rather remain non-functional than cede influence. And then there is Israel. Yes, it enforces a blockade. Yes, its security inspections, slow delivery. Yes, it can be harsh and bureaucratic, especially in wartime. But it has also allowed aid drops, opened new corridors, and coordinated efforts to deliver supplies, efforts that have repeatedly been attacked or undermined. So when Bret Stephens asks in his recent New York Times piece, quote, "If Israel were committing genocide, why isn't the death count higher?" He's not being callous. He's pointing out a truth few want to confront. If Israel wanted to annihilate Palestinians in Gaza, it could. It hasn't. Across the West and greater world, none of this is discussed. Instead, the narrative is fixed and binary. Israel is a Nazi state. Jews who support it are collaborators. And anyone who questions this view is either a coward, a racist, or a liar. This is not advocacy. This is ideological purification. I understand rage. I understand grief. But what I see is something else. A performance of moral superiority so absolute that it could only survive by denying others their nuance, their questions, even their right to be afraid. Because when Jews are compared to Nazis, when we're told our names are on lists, when we're accused of supporting genocide simply for caring about our people's safety, something older and darker stirs beneath the rhetoric, something we have seen before. Innocent Palestinians in Gaza are suffering. They desperately need food, water, and medicine. But those who claim to advocate on their behalf must first reckon with the uncomfortable truth that Hamas uses their suffering as a shield and broadcasts their suffering globally as a weapon. Aid will not flow freely until the terror regime that feeds on despair is dismantled, or, at the very least, circumvented. And just in recent days, Hamas effectively walked away from another ceasefire proposal. They submitted a revised plan that reversed key points already negotiated, including conditions for a phased hostage release. According to U.S. and Israeli officials, Hamas's response signaled a refusal to engage in good faith. As a result, both the U.S. and Israeli negotiating teams withdrew from the talks in Qatar. One senior U.S. official put it bluntly, quote, "Hamas showed no interest in ending the war." This breakdown came at a moment when over 6,000 aid trucks were stalled, and humanitarian conditions in Gaza had reached critical levels. And yet, amid all the outrage directed at Israel, very few people nowadays acknowledge Hamas's role in prolonging the war and blocking both peace and food. Why the silence? As long as we ignore that, no amount of righteousness will feed a single child. And as long as people feel safe using Holocaust language to target Jews, no amount of quote-unquote progressive branding will disguise what this really is. The answer to Gaza's humanitarian crisis will never be found in a comment thread, but perhaps it begins by naming things clearly. Hamas is not a liberation movement. It is a regime of cruelty. And truth, not slogans, must be our starting point. We must all work and pray not just for food to reach those in need, but for something far greater, a peace that ends the cycles of propaganda, terror, and righteous cruelty, a peace built on truth, not performance.